Welcome to Psyche Talks.
This is the deep dive.
And today we're tackling a really rich source. It's an excerpt from Erich Fromm's classic, The Art of Loving.
Yeah, a foundational text for many people thinking about love.
Absolutely. And our mission for this deep dive is basically to unpack Fromm's key ideas for you. You know, what he thinks love really is, why it's so often misunderstood.
And importantly, how he suggests it can actually be mastered.
Yeah.
Like an art form.
Exactly. So this isn't just a summary. We're looking for those aha moments, maybe some surprising angles, things that make these quite dense ideas feel more relatable, more actionable for you.
Making sense of the complex stuff.
Okay, let's unpack this.
So Fromm jumps right in with a pretty strong claim, doesn't he? About how contemporary Western culture really distorts our understanding of love.
Yeah, he talks about a market logic. How does that even apply to something like love?
Well, he argues quite forcefully that we tend to filter it through that lens. It's almost unconscious.
So we're evaluating people like products on a shelf.
That's pretty much his argument. We assess potential partners as if they were commodities. Their value is judged based on what's currently fashionable in the culture.
Ah, so the ideal partner changes over time.
Definitely. He mentions things like, maybe boldness was prized in women in the 1920s, whereas today it might be something else, maybe domesticity. Same for men, aggressive versus sociable. These things shift.
And love, then, is just finding the best deal you can get based on your own perceived market value.
That's the cold logic he's describing. It happens when both people feel they found the best object available, considering what they bring to the table themselves.
Wow. That sounds incredibly, transactional, almost cynical.
It can sound that way, yeah. And Fromm says this leads to a really major confusion. We mistake the initial intense feeling of falling in love for the actual state of being in love.
Okay, right. The big rush, the honeymoon phase everyone talks about.
Exactly that. That powerful, sometimes overwhelming emotion. He says it comes from the sudden collapse of barriers between two strangers.
And it feels amazing, especially if you felt lonely before.
Precisely. He points out it's particularly intoxicating for people who felt isolated. And sexual attraction can obviously amplify this hugely, creating this really powerful illusion of deep connection.
But it's an illusion, or at least temporary.
He insists it's temporary. That initial magic, as he puts it, inevitably fades. Familiarity sets in, the novelty wears off.
And then the disappointments, the boredom, the conflicts start to creep in.
Right, and people often confuse the sheer intensity of that initial infatuation, which might just reflect how lonely they were before, with the actual depth of genuine love.
That's a crucial distinction. Intensity doesn't equal depth.
Not necessarily. And here's a real kicker from Fromm. Despite seeing relationships fail all the time, seeing the disappointment, the idea persists that loving is somehow easy.
Yeah, you just fall into it. Like it's an accident, requires no effort.
Exactly. Unlike, say, medicine or carpentry or music or any other skill we value, people generally don't treat love as something that needs serious study and disciplined practice.
We put so much energy into careers, status, money.
But almost nothing, he argues, into actually learning how to love effectively. It's just left to instinct or chance.
So that's his core problem statement, isn't it? We desperately want love, but we approach it all wrong. We don't give it the serious attention it demands.
That's the heart of it. He argues very strongly that love is an art, just like living itself is an art. And mastering any art takes serious effort.
It needs discipline, a proper approach.
Right. Theory and practice. He breaks it down into those two key parts. First, you have to understand the theory.
The what and why of it.
And second, you have to develop the practice. The how. He uses medicine as an example. You need the theoretical knowledge, anatomy, diseases, all that.
But you only become a good doctor through practice. Years of it.
Exactly. Hands-on experience, trial, error, observation, repetition, until it becomes almost intuitive.
Mastery.
Theory plus practice. Makes total sense.
But then he has a third thing, which is really interesting and often missed. He says the pursuit of the art has to be of ultimate concern to you. Ultimate concern, meaning like top priority.
Yeah, a wholehearted commitment. That's what separates the master from the dabbler in any field, whether it's playing the violin or, Fromm argues, loving someone.
And that's where we really fall short with love in our culture. We say it's important, but our actions don't reflect that level of ultimate concern.
That's his challenging point. We all crave love. We talk about it constantly, but very few people actually treat it with that level of seriousness in their day-to-day lives.
We dedicate ourselves to getting ahead, making money.
But learning the art of loving, it gets sidelined. He sort of wonders if it's because we only really value knowledge that brings tangible rewards like money or prestige, love, which nourishes the soul.
Yeah.
Maybe we see it as a luxury, an indulgence we can't afford to work at seriously.
That really makes you think, doesn't it? Where do you actually put your energy?
It really does. So for this deep dive, we're mostly going to explore Fromm's theory of love. That's the bulk of this analysis, really. We'll touch on the practice, too. But he himself admits teaching practice just through words is, well, difficult.
Okay, let's dive into the theory then. If love is the answer, what's the question? Where does Fromm start?
Well, for him, you can't talk about love without first talking about human existence itself. Our fundamental condition as humans.
Setting the stage, understanding why love is so necessary in the first place.
Exactly. His view is that humanity kind of emerged from this purely instinctive animal state. We transcended nature. But in doing so, we lost that original harmony, that embeddedness.
Like being thrown out of the Garden of Eden, you can't go back.
That's the metaphor, yeah.
Yeah.
No, going back to instinct guiding everything. So the only way forward, he says, is to develop our reason, our consciousness, and find a new kind of harmony, a specifically human one.
Because instinct isn't enough anymore. We're aware.
We're aware. And that awareness, that self-consciousness, means we realize our separateness. We're separate from nature, separate from others, sometimes even separate from parts of ourselves. We know we're born, we'll die, we're vulnerable.
That sounds, deeply unsettling. Anxiety-provoking.
It absolutely is. This
Right.
awareness of being separate, isolated, it creates this profound anxiety. And that anxiety, Fromm argues, fuels our most powerful drive. The drive to overcome separateness, to achieve union, to connect.
So this need for connection, for fusion, it's not just a preference, it's fundamental to our survival.
He sees it as absolutely essential. Without finding some way to connect, he believes the result is mental breakdown or even self-destruction. The stakes are incredibly high.
Wow. Okay, so if this drive is so powerful, how do people usually try to satisfy it? What are the common strategies?
Fromm outlines a few common paths, but he's quick to point out their limitations. One is what he calls orgiastic states.
Orgiastic states.
An intense temporary fusion achieved through self-induced trances, maybe drugs, alcohol, sometimes even intense, fleeting sexual encounters. It feels like union, but it's temporary, often addictive, and can leave you feeling even more alone afterwards.
A quick fix that doesn't last.
Exactly. Another very common approach is conformity, trying to achieve union by just blending in, adopting the customs, beliefs, habits of the group, fitting in.
Becoming part of the herd so you don't feel alone.
Right. It offers a sense of belonging, but Fromm sees it as a false unity, because you often have to sacrifice your own integrity, your individuality, to conform, so you end up alienated from your true self. He thinks this is maybe the most common solution in modern society.
You lose yourself to belong. That's a heavy price.
It is. Then there's creative work, productive activity where you unite with the material you're working with.
Like a carpenter with wood or a writer with words.
Yes, that kind of creative act where you plan, execute, see the results of your labor. You merge with your work. But he notes this mainly applies to that kind of productive work. A lot of modern jobs, office work, assembly lines, he argues, fragment the work. You're just a cog. You don't feel that sense of wholeness or union.
So orgies, conformity, even creative work. They're all partial answers. They don't fully solve the problem of separateness.
That's his assessment. They're inadequate. The fullest, most mature, most satisfying answer to the problem of human existence, Fromm argues, is genuine interpersonal union, fusion with another person through love.
Ah, okay, that's the mature solution he mentioned earlier.
That's what he called it.
But clearly, given what he said about confusing falling in love with being in love, not all attempts at union are the same. He must distinguish between immature and mature forms.
Oh, absolutely. That's a critical distinction for him. He contrasts genuine mature love with what he calls symbiotic union.
Symbiotic union, like biology.
He draws the parallel directly from biology, specifically the mother-fetus relationship. You have two beings, but they function as one. The fetus is passive, receiving everything it needs from the mother.
And this plays out psychologically, too.
Yes, he sees psychological parallels. One form is passive, what he calls masochism. Here, a person escapes feeling isolated by basically making themselves part of someone else. Another person, maybe even a god or an institution, who directs them, protects them, is their life, in a way.
So surrendering your own self, your independence, to feel connected.
Exactly. They inflate the other person. He's everything, I am nothing except as part of him. They give up their integrity. The active form of this symbiotic urge is sadism.
Sadism. How does that fit?
The sadist tries to escape isolation by making another person part of themselves. By incorporating them, usually through domination, control, exploitation, they inflate their own ego by having someone dependent on them, worshiping them.
So one person submits, the other dominates, but both are trying to achieve fusion.
Yes, but Fromm stresses something important. The sadist is just as dependent on the submissive person as the masochist is on the dominant one. Their sense of self relies on controlling the other. The core issue in both cases is fusion without integrity.
Fusion without keeping your own self intact. I see.
Exactly. They're immature, dependent ways of relating, which brings us to his definition of mature love.
Which is?
Mature love is union, but under the condition of preserving one's own integrity, one's own individuality.
Ah, there it is again. That paradox. Two beings become one and yet remain two.
That's the absolute core of it for Fromm. Mature love is this active power, he says, that breaks down the walls separating people, uniting them.
But crucially, it allows, even encourages each person to be themselves, to keep their wholeness.
Precisely.
Okay, he keeps using this phrase, active power. Let's unpack that. It links back to love being an art, something you do. What does he mean by the active character of love?
Well, activity for Fromm isn't just being busy. It's about an inner state of aliveness, a kind of productive engagement with the world and others, not just passively reacting.
Okay, an inner vitality. And how does that relate to love?
He says the most fundamental expression of this active love is giving.
Giving. Now, that feels a bit countercultural, doesn't it? We often think about love in terms of what we get, what needs are met for us.
It absolutely pushes against that common view. Fromm argues that giving is actually the highest expression of human potency, of strength. He says it's inherently more joyous to give than to receive.
More joyous? Why?
Because in the act of giving, you experience your own vitality, your aliveness, your strength. And giving here isn't primarily about material things or giving up something in sacrifice.
So not just buying gifts or making sacrifices.
No, it's about giving forth from what is genuinely alive within you. Sharing your joy, your interest, your understanding, your knowledge, even your sadness. You give of your vital energy.
And in doing that, you enrich the other person.
And, crucially, you enhance your own sense of aliveness in the process. It's generative.
It sounds like a virtuous cycle. The more you give from that authentic place, the more alive you feel.
That's the idea. And he adds that true giving also implies receiving, but in a specific way.
How so?
Think of a good teacher. They give knowledge, but they are also taught by their students' questions and insights. An actor gives a performance, but receives energy from the audience. A therapist gives care, but learns from their patient. It's reciprocal when the relationship is genuinely productive.
I see. It's not a one-way street if it's authentic.
Right. But this ability to love through giving, insists, isn't automatic. It depends on your character development. You have to overcome dependency, narcissism, tendencies to exploit or hoard. It takes faith in your own capacities and courage.
So it's not just an action, it's a reflection of who you are, a developed capacity.
Exactly. Which leads him to identify 4 basic elements that he believes are present in all forms of mature love, whether it's romantic, parental, brotherly love, even love of God. He calls them a syndrome of attitudes because they're all interconnected.
Okay, what are these 4 elements?
They are care, responsibility, respect, and knowledge.
Care, responsibility, respect, knowledge. Okay, let's take them one by one. Care.
Care is the active concern for the life and growth of the person or thing that is loved. It's obvious in a mother's love for her child or how someone tends to a garden. Fromm is very clear. Where this active concern is lacking, there is no love.
It's about actively nurturing, wanting the other to flourish.
Precisely. He even uses the story of Jonah and the gourd. The idea being that the labor involved in making something grow is fundamental to love. Next is responsibility.
Responsibility, that sounds heavy, like an obligation.
Fromm clarifies it's not about obligation imposed from outside. It's a voluntary act, an ability and readiness to respond to the needs, spoken or unspoken, of another human being.
Respond. So it's about responsiveness, being attuned to others' needs.
Yes. A loving person feels responsible for others, in the sense of being ready to respond to their essential human needs, just as they respond to their own. Particularly in adult relationships, the psychic needs.
Like being your brother's keeper in a positive sense.
A great way to put it. But responsibility on its own could become controlling or dominating.
If it's not balanced by respect.
Exactly. Respect comes from the Latin respicere, meaning to look at. It's the ability to see a person as they truly are, in their unique individuality, without distortions from your own needs or expectations.
Seeing them objectively.
Yes, and wanting them to grow and unfold for their own sake, according to their own path, not for your purposes. It means fundamentally not exploiting them.
And he connects this to independence, right? You can only truly respect someone if you don't need them to be a certain way for you.
He makes that point strongly. You need to be able to stand on your own 2 feet. His famous line is, "Love is the child of freedom, never that of domination."
Freedom, not control. Got it. And the fourth element is knowledge.
Yes. How can you respect someone if you don't truly know them? How can care and responsibility be effective if they're blind? Knowledge here means penetrating beyond the surface, getting to the core of the other person.
Going deeper than just facts or appearances.
Right. And this is only possible, he says, if you can transcend your own self-concern and try to see the other person in their own terms, like understanding that someone's anger might really stem from fear or pain underneath.
Seeing the root causes, not just the symptoms.
Exactly. And for Murray connects this drive for knowledge and love to a fundamental human quest. The need to understand the secret of man, the mysteries ourselves and others. He thinks humans are ultimately unfathomable secrets.
A deep mystery at the core of each person.
Yes. And he contrasts 2 very different ways people try to grasp that secret. One is destructive, trying to gain complete power over another person, to force them, control them, make them into an object. This finds its extreme form in sadism and cruelty, trying to shatter the other person to force their secret out through suffering.
That's a really dark path to knowing. Trying to know by destroying.
It is. He mentions the impulse some have to dominate an enemy to get at their soul, or even a child breaking a toy apart to know it. Cruelty, in this view, can be a distorted manifestation of this desire to penetrate the secret.
So what's the alternative path to knowing the secret?
Love. Genuine love is the other path. It's an active, loving penetration into the other person's reality. And paradoxically, in the act of loving union, the intense desire to know the secret is stilled because you experience it directly.
Through the connection itself.
Yes.
Yeah.
He puts it poetically. In the act of fusion, I know you, I know myself, I know everybody, and I know nothing. It's knowledge through union, not just analysis. Sadism destroys and remains ignorant. Love unites and knows.
So psychological understanding is helpful, maybe necessary.
It helps you see clearly, overcome illusions, be objective.
But it's not the same as the deep knowing that happens in the act of loving union itself.
Exactly. And he makes a really interesting, maybe sharp observation here about modern culture. He suggests the huge interest in psychology might actually betray a lack of love. Psychological knowledge can become a substitute for the real thing instead of a step towards it.
Like we analyze instead of connect.
That's the danger he sees. He compares it to theology versus mysticism. Theology creates complex ideas about God. Mysticism seeks the direct experience of union with God. Psychology should ultimately lead to love, just as rationalism can ultimately lead to mysticism.
Wow. Okay, so care, responsibility, respect, and knowledge. These 4 are all interconnected, interdependent.
Yes, a syndrome of attitudes. You find them together in the mature, productive person who has moved beyond narcissism and developed humility. They form the bedrock of the capacity to love.
That covers a huge amount of the human condition, why we need union, mature versus immature love, the core elements. Did he also talk about a biological dimension, something about male-female polarity?
He did. Beyond the existential need for union, he points to a biological drive for union between what he calls the masculine and feminine poles.
Ah, the idea that male and female complete each other in some way.
Yes, he touches on ancient myths about original androgyny or Eve coming from Adam's rib. But importantly, he argues this polarity also exists within each individual.
Psychologically.
Yes, we all contain both masculine and feminine psychological qualities, maybe like penetrating, receiving, or spirit matter. Achieving inner harmony involves integrating these internal polarities.
And this polarity, both internal and external, is linked to creativity.
He sees it as the basis for all creativity, both biological reproduction and psychic creation. He even suggests that a homosexual deviation might stem from a difficulty in achieving this polarized union, sharing the underlying pain of separateness felt by anyone, regardless of orientation, who hasn't mastered mature love.
So it's a fundamental principle he sees everywhere.
Yes. He points to it in nature, earth and rain, river and ocean, night and day, darkness and light. He quotes Rumi beautifully about day and night seeming like enemies, but secretly being lovers serving a common purpose.
That's a lovely image. So this is much deeper than just sexual attraction.
Much deeper. And this leads him to critique Freud. He thought Freud made a mistake seeing love only as an expression or sublimation of the sexual instinct, mainly driven by releasing tension.
Scratching a niche, basically.
Kind of. Fromm argues the opposite. Sexual desire is often a manifestation of the deeper need for love and union, often sparked by the desire to unite with the complementary pole. He felt Freud, maybe due to the patriarchal views of his time, saw sex primarily as a masculine penetrative drive and missed this whole psychobiological polarity aspect.
Thank you for your support and for listening.